The Lok Sabha has endorsed the statutory resolutions on the presidential order on Jammu and Kashmir and passed the reorganizational bill that splits the state into two union territories. Amongst those who voiced opposition to the government's move in Parliament over the last 2 days, in the Lok Sabha today was senior Congress leader Shashi Tharoor, who joined us now. Mr. Tharoor, a number of Congress leaders spoke in both houses over the last 2 days, but we've not heard from the last two presidents of the party on this issue. Any particular reason why?
Sorry, you said you've not heard from whom? Did you say the president of the party?
That's right. So what I would phrase as the last precedent, given that taking into current account that Rahul Gandhi's resignation stands, so Rahul Gandhi or Sonia Gandhi chose not to speak in the House. I ask because I'd like to understand what the party's stand on this is
Rahul
officially.
Gandhi, as you know, has... Yeah, Rahul Gandhi has very much conveyed his views on social media. As far as speaking in Parliament is concerned, that task was left to us. But don't forget, the president of the parliamentary party is Sonia Gandhi. And the policy line we took was discussed and agreed very much under her leadership, and has not only her blessing but her full support, which she and Rahul Gandhi demonstrated by their presence in the Lok Sabha, of which they are members. While this was being discussed. So there's no question that there's any division of opinion within the parliamentary party. I am aware that some colleagues outside who are not part of the parliamentary party have expressed different views. It's probably healthy that in a party like ours, a number of different views can be aired on a major issue. After all, party whips only apply to party members in Parliament anyway. But quite apart from that, the line that I articulated, that Manish Tiwari articulated, that Ghulam Nabi Azad articulated, and Mr. P. Chidambaram articulated, all of these represent the line of the Congress party, and they are completely consistent with each other.
I'll tell you why I opened by asking this, because Rahul Gandhi's tweets referred to the manner in which the current clampdown in Jammu and Kashmir is enforced, the way former chief ministers have been arrested. It isn't an articulation on 370 in itself. So I'd like to understand first, before we go into the manner that this has been passed in the House and the law and order situation in Jammu and Kashmir, I'd like to understand the party's view on that particular article going into these last 2 days, and what it has been in the House in these 2 days. Because even on that, the articulation in the Rajya Sabha from Mr. Azad and from you as I heard your 15-minute speech was on the historical references and the manner that it was carried out in. I'd like to understand what the official line as communicated by the parliamentary party president to you was.
No, the parliamentary party president is part of a collegial process where we all sit down together, discuss the line we should take, and then we go authorized to go out and take that line. But broadly speaking, I myself began with precisely the same point that Rahul Gandhi has made in his tweets, namely the dismaying fact that on what turned out to be a dark day for Indian democracy, that such a major decision was taken without, as you know, a legislature in session for over 6 months, with many leaders, democratically elected leaders, locked up under house arrest or elsewhere, with, frankly, a situation in which no consultation worth the name has taken place with the very people whose constitutional future was being decided. That was what we were concerned about. And that remains. I'm not going to sit here and say that everything about 370 was good or bad, or that after 70 years there wasn't a good reason to review it. My argument would be that if they wished to do that, they certainly could have tried to do it when they were in power in Kashmir as part of a coalition government with the PDP, and they could certainly, as the central government, have embarked upon consultations with the elected legislature and other representative leaders. There is no obligation under the Constitution to agree with the views of the Kashmiri representatives, but not consulting them at all is certainly a betrayal of democratic practice. And what is very striking is that you have literally a clampdown on Kashmir that is total, with internet shut off, with telephone connections down, landlines not working, TV switched off, and then in this blackout, you actually unleash a decision that affects the Kashmiris more profoundly than anyone else in India. And you do it by saying that, as far as you're concerned, the constitutional requirement of consulting the state has been met by the fact that you consulted the governor you yourself appointed. In other words, you sought your own consent to take the decision you wanted to take. That is not democracy as we in India understand it for the last 70 years. And even the legality and constitutionality of substituting our parliament for the Legislative Assembly of Kashmir is a highly dubious proposition which undoubtedly will be tested in the courts by other interested parties. But as I said in the speech, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to argue and quibble on legal points. As a Democrat, as a parliamentarian, as a concerned citizen of India, I do have concerns about the manner in which this was done, about the fact that our Kashmiri colleagues and friends or ex-colleagues have been locked up while this decision was being done, that there was no consultation with the representatives of that state and with the people of that state. And that is really a letdown. Now, because they did it in this way, a lot of the consequences that I warned about could still transpire. If it had been done in a sort of popular way, as it had been done in Junagadh, as it had done in Sikkim, different story where people wanted a change constitutionally. Here, there was no attempt made to even create the climate for a popular demand for a change.
Fair enough. I will get to the process point by point. I just want to get to our viewers a clear sense of where the party stands on this. I'll tell you why I asked. You said Congress Parliamentary Party represented a view in both houses. Those that have presented this in a different light are, one, the fact that your Rajya Sabha whip resigned on this matter yesterday. Many other Congress members, you said outside the parliamentary party, chief among them, Mr. Scindia, was your last whip in the last Lok Sabha. He is not a member of the current parliamentary party. You had Milind Deora, you had Jaiveer Shergill, you had Aditi Singh, the MLA from Raebareli. All of them on Twitter have posted a view that's divergent to that of, as you say, the parliamentary party. Is the larger party beyond those that are the MPs divided on this issue right now?
No, I would not accept that proposition, because currently the party structure is essentially leaderless, and there isn't a functioning, active presidential leadership in the party. And certainly the tradition in the party of encouraging free expression of views has to be, in my view, respected. I hope one day myself to be the beneficiary of having expressed certain views freely and frankly, where I'm not in the forum that is being questioned. But those within the parliamentary party are the ones who are bound by a whip. So as far as the party line, so to speak, is concerned, it is within the parliamentary party. There was absolutely no divergence from it. The one person who disagreed, as you rightly pointed out, resigned. But everybody else has stayed on in the party, in parliament, and voted along the lines that the party has guided them to do. So I don't see any question of any confusion or lack of clarity. But I would agree that outside the parliamentary party, people who might, had they been in the parliamentary party, been able to contribute a different point of view before we arrived at a line. Since they couldn't do so, they've done so outside, but that's perfectly fair. I'm not sure they would have prevailed in this case, because the views taken within the parliamentary party meeting and by the parliamentary party president, Mrs. Gandhi, were certainly unequivocal.
Okay. Let me run through the process very quickly with you. The point you made onto the manner that this was pushed through Parliament and the way the central government has interpreted the language in the Constitution to substitute government of the state to mean governor of the state, to use that interchangeably, and to use one section of that that article to change one and then change it back. On other recent matters of constitutional importance, things like floor tests in the House, representatives of the Congress have approached the Supreme Court in matters of great hurry. That's not happened so far in this particular situation. Do you believe it to be imminent? Do you know that any conversation within the party that there would be representations made to the Supreme Court on this in the imminent future?
To be honest, I don't, because I've actually been completely focused on Parliament. I've literally just come out of Parliament and headed to a series of interviews, including yours. But let me just say that I have no doubt, knowing our country and its litigious nature, that if Congress party doesn't do it, somebody else will, and certainly some Kashmiri who has a direct stake in this is bound to do it. One of the MPs who wasn't in Kashmir and therefore not subject to the lockdown was former Justice Masoodi, who actually is a member of parliament from the National Conference, and he spoke. But what's interesting is that he also was a judge who, in one of the important cases, was one of two judges on a two-judge bench that has ruled on these issues. So he has a certain judicial heft, and I don't think he's going to just take this lying down. I'm sure that he, for example, will find that he has a locus standi to approach the Supreme Court to take this matter up. I don't know whether he will do so. He hasn't confided in me, but it seems to me there are plenty of people who will challenge this in the courts, and I hope that the government is able to give a convincing and robust defense. But whatever defense they can give on the legality, as I said in Parliament, you may be able to prove that you've worked within the letter of the law, but you've certainly violated the spirit of the Constitution. The intent of the Constitution makers was very clearly that the legislature of the state, in other words, the elected representatives of the people, have to be consulted. So by going through a legal sleight of hand and coming up with this formula, which you've summarized quite ably, that is, you use one article to amend another. You use 370 to amend 361, then use 367 to in effect amend 370. That is a very, very peculiar way of going about things, and equally odd is to say that you have the concurrence of the state that's required by consulting your own governor, and that you have the consent of the legislature as required by the Constitution, by ensuring that in your interpretation the parliament in Delhi has taken on all the powers of the legislature in Delhi, in Srinagar, by actually having a president's rule for this period.
Right.
The entire thing clearly has been very well planned. Whether it'll stand the test of the courts is not for me to say. I'm not a judge.
Right.
But as I said, the spirit of our democracy is lying in tatters today.
Do you believe, since you're concentrating on the parliamentary matters that have happened over the last 2 days, do you believe what Adir Ranjan Chaudhary said in the Lok Sabha today was counterproductive to the party's point?
I don't think it would be right for me to comment on party colleagues. People are reacting spontaneously to what goes on, and I would rather not address that issue. Certainly, when I had a chance to offer a clarification to something Amit Shahji was saying, I didn't have the mic given to me, but I said it loud enough for the House to clear that when Nehruji took the issue to the UN, he only took the issue of the international aggression against India by Pakistan. He did not take any internal arrangements, constitutional matters, or domestic disputes to the UN. And that needs to be stated on the record. But the going to the UN was about complaining about Pakistan's aggression. And that, I think, it's very difficult to fault Prime Minister Nehru for, because there clearly had been aggression on our territory by the Pakistanis.
Since the Home Minister said that as and when the situation in Kashmir returns to normal as the Home Ministry sees fit, will you seek updates from time to time in the coming weeks and months from the Home Minister on how the law and order situation is improving, to give some visibility to whether and when this state returns to full statehood?
Well, as you know, I asked in Parliament at the end of my speech for the Home Minister to cooperate with an all-party delegation, to welcome and receive an all-party delegation of MPs to go and see the conditions on the ground and judge for themselves and share that with the nation. Sadly, he avoided reacting to that in his reply, and there was in the Speaker's rush to wind up the session, there was no chance to ask that question once again. But I do believe the request must be pursued seriously, and I intend to remind him on social media that he hasn't answered this request. I think many MPs would want to see for themselves, meet their colleagues and friends, and see what the people of Kashmir are enduring at the moment. It's really looking, from all accounts we're getting through all the communications restrictions there are, it's looking very, very troubling.
My final question to you, something that you mentioned a few minutes back, that the somewhat unclear stand between the parliamentary party and those outside it, how much of that stems from the leadership crisis that the party is in right now? You, in the last few days and weeks, you've called for urgent resolving of that situation. Does something like what's happened the last 2 days lend even more urgency to that? And what have you heard within the party's leadership and the CWC in what the timeline is to resolving that situation?
I have not lost a minute in conveying to everybody I can in the senior echelons of the party, those members of the working committee I've been able to speak to and reach. I'm not a member of the committee myself, of how important this is. I believe the perception of drift and indecision is hurting the party. I believe that whoever the working committee names as an interim president will at least be able to give some clear direction to the party, will be able to bring some active leadership to the party. And then, as you know, my own view is that there should be free and open elections for anyone who would like to put themselves forward in order to take the reins of the party with the support of party workers. My worry at the moment is that, yes, indeed, perhaps there is in this absence of a clear and active, top-notch direction, that people will perhaps, express ideas in different directions and end up creating the sort of, shall we say, confusion in your minds that they seem to have created. In my own view, the party line in Parliament is only binding on the MPs, and those outside are free to express their own views. Had they been in Parliament, they could have tried to influence the outcome of our line. Clearly they weren't, because we had no real dissent within the party when our position was discussed, and before Manish and I were tasked to speak in the Lok Sabha about it. So let me say very clearly and directly, independent of what happened in the last couple of days, where there was really no confusion within the parliamentary party and apparently some different directions outside, let me just stress that as far as the party leadership is concerned, it cannot come a day sooner for the working committee at its very next meeting to take a decision, whatever decision, to go ahead and give the party some clear leadership and some clear direction.
All right. On that note, Shashi Tharoor, thank you very much for talking to BloombergQuint on developments in Parliament of the last 36 hours that nobody is likely to forget in a hurry. Thank you.